I'm a landscape architect at the University of Georgia. I'm interested and have spent a good bit of time at granite rock outcrops in and around this region. Granite rock outcrops are located primarily in the Piedmont region of the United States through Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and into Virginia. The interesting thing is that 90% of all granite rock outcrops actually occur in Piedmont, Georgia. I live here in Athens, Georgia, and we have a natural area called the Rock and Shoals Flat Rock Outcrop Natural Area. And I've spent many times going to this area over the years. The granite rock outcrop is a unique environment that starts with a bare layer of granite interspersed with lichens, mosses, perennials, grasses, and eventually red cedar and pine trees. Here we can see actually a painting of the granite rock outcrop with the various vegetation working its way in and around the rock, into the cracks and crevices, and eventually creating a soil substrate. Obviously, the granite rock outcrop is a very hard surface, but even this hard surface can be broken down with lichens, mosses, chemical weathering, and physical weathering such as freezing and thawing. The unique thing about granite rock outcrops are this is one of the few places where we see primary succession. Primary succession exists when we go from bare rock to a climax community or climax forest community. We move through bare rock into lichens and mosses, into some of the annuals and perennials, eventually into some of the intermediate species, grasses, shrubs, etc. And then ultimately we move into a climax community. Here in Georgia, that climax community would be oak, hickory, and possibly magnolia. Here you can see some of the early pioneer species working on the surface of granite rock outcrops. We see the lichens, the blue-green lichens, we see some of the mosses, and some of the simple grasses. Eventually, this vegetation and physical weathering will build up a very small and very shallow soil substrate. That gives way to more complicated mosses, and again, building up this soil layer. If we look at this in section, we realize that the species diversity is essentially determined by soil depth. And so in the middle of these saucers where we have greater soil depth, we have more complex species. That could be the grasses, could be perennials, eventually giving way to woody species. On the edges where we have shallow areas, we would have lichens and mosses. There are certain species that grow only on a granite rock outcrop. These are referred to as endemic species. These include things like the dimorpha, some of the mosses and lichens. And many of these species are uniquely adapted for the conditions on the rock outcrop. This is a pool sprite that presents itself only when we have standing water on the site. When we go into a drought condition, these dry up and go away. Some of the other species that we might see include things like Confederate daisy, some of the succulents like prickly paracactus, some of the grasses and sedges of this area. Also, many of these are endemic to the granite rock outcrop. I've been bringing students out to the granite rock outcrop for a good bit of my career at the University of Georgia. We bring them out to observe, to sketch, to look at the dynamics and the patterns and the processes in this area. We have them draw sections, elevations, and then ultimately we have them look at this as a representation of a garden depicting the granite rock outcrop.